Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the program Through My Eyes with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. And thank you for joining us at this new time. For those who are watching from Nigeria, thank you for joining us at this new time due to the time changes, daylight savings, and that. Prof, once again, you are welcome to the program this evening, and we look forward to an exciting time.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here again with our viewers, and I'm looking forward to an interactive session and an exciting session.
Thank you, sir. Prof, let's get right into this. There are some questions that have come through that we want to put to you this evening. As we start to look at some of the more international issues that are happening. But there's this one point that we cannot get away from. Over the last few weeks, we've witnessed a major change in dynamic in how youths have become vocal in their call for justice. Many of these protests across the different nations of the world have turned violent. A few days ago, we saw the protest in Philadelphia, and that one went violent very quickly. They were also calling for end to police brutality in that case as well. Prof, are we starting to see an international trend building here? And is this something that leaders need to really start to take a cognizance of the trend we're starting to see?
You know, each period when what looks like a new phenomenon occurs, you need to take a step backwards and think about history. People who went to fight the First World War were youths. People who went to fight the Second World War were youths. People who took part in the civil rights movement in the 60s in the United States were youths. People who took part in the anti-Vietnam War demonstration in the United States were youths. People who took part in the quote-unquote revolution in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, during the anti-Soviet demonstrations in those countries were youths. It is usually youths who step forward when things are not going right. So I'm not really surprised that it is the period now of the youths. Maybe in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, there will be another phenomenon that will activate a drive for change. And the youth of today by then will have become parents, and it is their children who will now become the street protesters. Having said that, the import of your question calls for an appeal to the shakers and movers of present society to make provisions for youth energy to be channeled into public policy positions so that you are not just hearing their voices on the streets. You will be hearing their voices in parliament, in the cabinet, on the judicial benches, wherever policies are being made. Youth should be visible there. And to that extent, I'm happy. Uh, at the relative young age of, I believe, two, if not the entire three judges or justices of the Supreme Court appointed by Trump, I don't like their policies. I don't like their judicial orientation. I'm just making reference to their youth. Uh, in Nigeria, where each state has been asked to set up judicial panels to investigate police misconduct, two or three of members of the panel have been nominated by the youth themselves. So it's their time. And I just, as I pray and hope that their energy, their vitality will find room in public policy activist positions.
Uh, Prof, let me just drill down on your last point there. You talk about, their energy. Um, do you foresee youths being able to carry out the protest as they are doing in these different countries for a prolonged period? Because if we look at even before the killing of George Floyd, we've always had these issues with police brutality and things like that. But post George Floyd, we've seen youths coming out across many nations. Portugal, I think they have an issue there, or Poland, they have an issue. The US has an issue. Do you see them being able to sustain the kind of protests required for change in the long run?
Um, I really don't have an answer to that question because you'll notice that the Black Lives Matter protest kind of faded out. Now, one might say is because they were now diverting their attention to voter registration in the United States, but they had faded out by and large in the United Kingdom. Um, so it's difficult. It's difficult to say. However, as I said, I'm not sure on what platform now. They never really die out. They plant seeds of reform, seeds of change. And it's like those seeds will just be waiting for opportunities to sprout out again. Number two, it's not that they don't have any effect. Young people have been elected across the length and strength and breadth of the United States into American Congress. Obviously, it is not in every political system that the avenues for youth participation will be that manifest. There are some political systems that are so fossilized, controlled by ancient of days, where the youth really have to continue to bang their heads against the doors. But I'm hoping, and I've seen some evidence of this, that organizations and institutions um, have started to introduce changes to open up their organizations to accommodate, to be more pluralistic. Let me just put it that way. Whether the pluralism will manifest itself into, more people of color, uh, or more of the youth coming in. And, as the world becomes more technological, I think governments and organizations will need more IT people to cope with the rest of, to cope with the world. And that's where the talent of the youth will come into play. We are moving away now from being a paper generation, a paper civilization, to an IT civilization, and the youth have an edge here. So we may be going into the age of the youth gradually.
One thing you have talked about in the past, Prof, is this point of the youth taking part in from the grassroots and doing what they can from the grassroots. And I want to get your views on something that's happening in the United States election today. What we're seeing is that the youths have turned out in large numbers for the, in fact, it says that we're about 6 days left, and we've already had more than half of the ballots we had for the entire 2016 elections. And from all indication, youths have played a significant part in that number and the rise of those who have taken advantage of pre-election voting. Is this something we should be watching more closely as a model of where youths are now saying, yes, we're protesting on the one hand, but we're also taking advantage of the electoral process to make our views known and to drive home our points?
Most certainly. First of all, and commentators have drawn attention into it. The youth tuned off in 2016, and most analysts, most scholars agree that that's one of the factors that led to the unexpected victory of Donald Trump. Because on election day, these youths just didn't bother. They were not activated enough to vote. People have also made that point that even Brexit in Britain was due to young people taking the day off to go to the beach, or anyway, they tuned off. They didn't go to vote because they expected that, well, no, who in his right mind was going to vote for Brexit? Well, there were enough people who decided to vote Brexit, and that non-participation by the youth was one of the factors. So, one thing that must definitely happen if you want to keep the youth engaged is that they must see that their votes are counted. The Supreme Court has now become engaged in this major battle between the Republicans and the Democrats as to how many days after the election, even if your ballot was stamped or the letter, the postmark was election day, the Republicans want the votes to be counted within 1 or 2 days. I'm talking about postal ballots now. While the Democrats, knowing the vast number of votes that have been cast and that will be cast, postal votes, before election day, want an extended period of time. And now the Supreme Court is having to decide, will it be 2 days, will it be 5 days, or how many days? All this struggle is relevant to the youth participation. If the youth come to a conclusion that their votes had been wasted, their postal votes have been wasted, they may decide to go back to the streets. But if their votes count, and although we keep talking about the White House, there are so many other, posts that are relevant, that are going. The White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives, the state assemblies, state gubernatorial posts. Because if, for example, you are going to increase the number of seats in the Supreme Court in order to get the Supreme Court back from the right wingers, you are going to need to control both the Senate and the House of Rep. If there are constitutional changes that are going to need to be activated, you are going to need state government, state assemblies to vote. So you are going to need control of those. So if the votes of the youth count, and the liberal wing control all these major institutions of governance in the United States, then in fact, other countries may then start to take a look at the United States as a possible paradigm that they can use to accommodate the activism of the youth.
Thank you for that, Prof. While we're on the United States, let's talk a little bit about the elections. We are less than 5 days into that. Everybody is looking quite keenly at the process there to see what that's going to be like. But as has been highlighted by so many people over the last few weeks, and you, sir, have also spoken to the fact that we are facing uncertain times here, predominantly because of the temperament of President Trump. Now, the question to you is this, Prof. At this time during the 2016 election, Clinton dropped somewhat in some of the ratings, but Biden seems to be holding at this stage. The Trump campaign appears to be cash strapped, as we're seeing. What are your thoughts on the challenges facing the Republican Party right now, so close to the election?
Um, let's just talk about the challenges facing the Republic. Because about a week or 2 weeks ago, I pointed out that the major actors on the American political scene. There are not two. There are several. At least I can count four. The Democrats, the Abraham Lincoln Republicans, or the Renaissance Republicans, the ordinary decent Republicans, and the Nazi Republicans. Now, Americans don't like anyone drawing their attention to the fact that there is a Nazi America. But any America where them violent right-wingers on the streets can carry symbols of Nazism, the swastika on the flags, and all the other symbols that the Nazis used in Germany, surely cannot deny that they have the presence of Nazi sympathizers or admirers in the United States who are publicly visible. And if America is to redeem its image, it must deal with this element of Nazism or and racism. It must deal with that. And unfortunately, the views and the activism of these Nazis are impacting on even appointments to the American Supreme Court. I hope that, and this is the relevance of a point I made earlier on about not ignoring the state assemblies and state gubernatorial contests. If there is a substantial victory by a coalition of the Democrats and the Lincoln Republicans and the Renaissance Republicans, because they've all said they're going to vote for Biden. If there is a substantial victory for them, they may then consider an abrogation of the Electoral College. Because really, if the concept of the Electoral College was being used in other countries, the United States would have been at the forefront of those who would have been arguing that this is not democracy, that this shows no respect for people's rights and people's votes. But because it is being used in the United States, political scientists like me have found that the concept has crept into the lexicon of political science in defining democracy. So, and this electoral college allows the Nazi Americans to show more influence than their number is worth. So to that extent, a lot is riding on this election. If the Electoral College were not there, Clinton will be the one we'll be referring to today as President Hillary Clinton, because she won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. But because of the Electoral College, which is an anachronism, Donald Trump became president.
Prof, on this issue that we're getting, unprecedented times for the US and the elections and what is happening there now. We never thought we would be considering some of the things happening today in the context of the United States. But we see, for example, that legal minds are starting to come together to consider the calculus of President Trump choosing not to accept the loss. What are your views on that?
Well, look, 10 years ago, if you had asked me this question, my reaction would have been, are you kidding me? We're talking about the United States of America. We're not talking about some banana republic somewhere. But now, the unthinkable has become thinkable. So, uh, in Africa, some presidents or some presidential candidates who refuse to accept results of elections have ended up being dragged before the International Criminal Court. I hope that's not going to be the fate of President Donald Trump. Uh, it is going to call into play the role of the Supreme Court because the Democrats and the Republicans will go that far. If the Supreme Court were to then uphold the refusal of Trump to accept the result of the election on the grounds that the results were fraudulent and unsustainable, don't be surprised if the Supreme Court is burnt down, because I suspect that at that stage, even the American military will show a reluctance to engage the rioters on the street. They will show it, a reluctance. So I hope it never gets that far. And that's why I made reference earlier on to the alliance, the coalition of the Democrats, the Abe Lincoln Republicans, the Renaissance Republicans, the decent Republicans. Their alliance is going to matter because it is that lunatic right wing that they will be fighting.
Yes. Now there is a question here on YouTube, which I believe you have addressed on this program before, and it is about the unrest in Mali. And this person wants to know what your views are about the unrest that we have in Mali.
Well, I think that there are more pressing issues, current pressing issues in the world that I really hate to keep revisiting issues that we have dealt with and that we have settled. But having brought it up, let me just say this, just one sentence. The problem in Mali, which has resurfaced in Guinea, which is resurfacing in Kyrgyzstan, all deal with the sanctity or non-sanctity of the electoral process. That's one combo of issues versus sanctity of governance. Democracy is not just about elections. Democracy is about governance as well. And various constituent uh, 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 you know, charters, constitutions of all these countries enjoin governments to obey decisions of courts. They enjoin government to obey their constitution, not to have term elongation. The issue that we were faced with in Mali had to deal with corrupt electoral process. The issues we are facing in Guinea revolve around term elongation, the president amending the constitution to run for a third term, and corrupt electoral process. The issue we are facing in Kyrgyzstan is a president who has been there for ages, for eternity, and yet to keep who keep undergoing electoral process that lacks all credibility. So while we're concerned about demonstrations on the street, while we are concerned about soldiers, about the military overthrowing government, and that is anti-democratic, we also must be concerned with term elongation, refusal to obey judicial decisions of the court, violation of the constitution itself by the government in power, and of course, corrupt elections. So there's got to be a balance in the paradigm. You must condemn elongation of terms, just as you condemn violence on the streets. You must condemn corrupt electoral process, just as you condemn coup d'etats that get rid of corrupt governments. The two sides of the balance.
Okay, thank you for that, Prof. Back to the U.S. In this election, we've seen President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle Obama have been very, very vocal in their support for Joe Biden, and in their desire to see him win that election. Now, is it unusual for a past president to be this vocal in the election? And do you think that the Obama effect, if we could call it that, is enough to help Biden get into position as president?
Well, there are three questions you've rolled into the Obama factor. Yes, most certainly it's obvious that former presidents don't get involved in electoral process or affecting their successors. However, people will claim that these are unusual times in the United States. These are times that break men's hearts. These are times when it's not just the legacy of the Obama presidency that is at stake. Again, recall what I said earlier on about the parties which constitute the factors in this election. For the avoidance of doubt, I will repeat them. The Democrats, the Abraham Lincoln Republicans, the Renaissance Republicans, the normal Republicans, and the Nazi Americans. The Republic is in danger. The Republic is in danger. And this must have motivated Barack Obama to step up to the plate. Whether he would add substantially, and I think the emphasis there is on substantially, to the electoral support for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Probably it's after the election that with hindsight, we will be able to say, oh, yes, he did, or no, he didn't. There is no doubt that Obama is still very, very popular in the United States. However, there is a school of thought who actually hold that it is the alarm felt by white Americans that a Black American, an African American, occupied the White House that gave the stimulus to a Trump candidacy. In a way, I could challenge that by saying if the first election of Obama was a mistake, something that slipped by, how about the second term? He again won the second term. So probably maybe that is there, maybe it isn't there. I'm not really sure of that. So but I think that right-thinking Americans are genuinely alarmed at the fate of their republic, that any help in getting rid of Trump would be most welcome.
Thank you for that, Prof. Before we move on, there is a question here, and I think the context is slightly different from what we've done before, and it's taking us back to the issue of the youths and the impact of what is going on foreign policy. Does it change the dynamic from a foreign policy perspective?
I don't understand the question.
The fact that what is happening with the youths today, does that change the way nations may choose to conduct foreign policy?
I don't think we need to uh, there will be issues on which you will have a world coalition of youth. It will depend on the issue. For example, we seem to have forgotten now, or maybe it's been driven into the background, the youth mobilization on environmentalism, the drive of the youth to bring an urgency into the way climate change is viewed. You know, we are running into the danger of thinking that the youth created the awareness on a lot of these issues. No, on climate change, on animal rights, on environmentalism, for decades there have been an awareness and a concern for animal rights, for climate change, and what have you. But an urgency and a passion had been brought into it by the youth. It's also the issue with uh, uh, um, police brutality. It has always been there. However, to force government to make it a matter of top priority is what the youth had brought into the campaign. But you know, one of the things that has surprised me and that has saddened me is the pushback and the fight back by the police, including even police in the United Kingdom. I thought when this whole thing was boiling over that the police, that a message would go around from the chief constable, the police commissioner, inspector general of police, to all his men and women in uniform. Times have changed. The force itself will no longer tolerate some kind of behavior, only for me to find out that the police have pushed back. They have their unions, and their unions have pushed back. What I expected was a mea culpa. We are sorry. Now, look, I know that there are decent men and women in uniform who who daily face challenges on the streets. But the few amongst them are giving the rest a very, very bad name. And instead of hiding their heads, these bad ones have are actually pushing back on the reform and the changes that are needed. So now police brutality in one country, especially due to the activities of the citizens in the diaspora, are becoming a matter of international concern. And governments who refuse to deal with this matter internationally are likely to face embarrassment internationally, and this will have repercussions on your foreign policy objectives, since there will be elections you'll be contesting for, there will be resolutions you are interested in promoting, and people will be raising with you those awkward questions about what your police is doing to the youth. on your streets.
Prof, let me move the conversation to the United Kingdom. We've had news coming out today that the immediate past leader of the Labour Party has been suspended from the Labour Party on claims that he referred to anti Semitism as an overstated problem. Now, we know the Labour Party has had history in this area with many of its previous senior members having referred to it in like manner. Is this is it right for him to have been suspended? And could we consider this just as a political stunt that the new leader is playing on this particular issue?
Liberalism has always been confronted with a dilemma, a conundrum. Liberalism believes in free speech, free political action, and what have you. And yet, freedom has been confronted with the excesses of free speech and freedom to hold your own views. Such excesses manifested itself in the way in the rise of Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy and several countries in Europe. And that led to the brutal treatment of Jews. Such excesses even led to what we later on call hate speech. And that brought pressure on government as to how to deal with hate speech. A famous jurist on the American Supreme Court, forgive me if I'm not terribly certain of the name. I think it's Felix Frankfurter. But if I'm wrong about the name, I'm not wrong about the point I want to make. You know, the American Constitution is almost frozen in a solid of gold on freedom of speech. And Justice Frankfurter held that freedom of speech does not extend to you having the freedom to shout fire in a crowded cinema, knowing fully well that that expression will lead to a stampede and probably lead to loss of life. And that's what till today, when I'm teaching in my class, I always refer to as, fire in a cinema, in a crowded cinema hall, as as unacceptable excess of freedom of speech. So, the Labour Party might have come to the conclusion that Semitism in any form or shape, or anything that may be interpreted as downplaying it, is a danger to the national political health, not only of the Labour Party itself, but of the political health of Britain. And people know the thousands of lives that Britain lost fighting Nazi Germany. So you don't want to see anything that may sound like you are diminishing the danger of that. But I also wish that they will turn the same searchlight onto racism, because racism is just as dangerous as anti-Semitism. So to that extent, I find no, I find no, uh, I don't think that the action taken against Corbyn is a danger to freedom of speech at all. I don't think it's contradictory to freedom of speech.
All right, we've got about 6 minutes to the end of the program. There is one particular issue that we would like to hear your views on, and it's in relation to China and the economic recovery that has been predicted for China. Forecasts are saying that China is going to be the only major economy in the world to have positive GDP figures for 2020 and even probably going into 2021. What are your views on that?
I think that it's a surprising development. Um, and probably the reason for that could be found in the fact that Chinese factories were able to go into overdrive on the production of the personal um, medical equipment that was needed by the rest of the world to combat COVID-19. I think probably for about 6 months or so this year, the whole world was dependent on China for the production of PPE. Um, so that's the answer on the economic side. It is unfortunate for China that its growth would then be dependent on profiting from COVID-19. I think it will increase the level of anti-Chinese sentiment in the world. I think China is not likely to be a beneficiary politically and morally on this issue. It's going to play definitely into the hands of Trump in this last few days of the campaign. That, well, this is what he's been talking about. Now you can see the evidence of it. And even if Biden wins, he's going to also come under pressure, um, not to be seen as going into an embrace with China, when in the public domain it is being perceived as benefiting from COVID-19. It will definitely strengthen the conspiracy theory that this thing was deliberately done, even though I'm not a believer in this conspiracy theory. But there you are. It's a pity.
Prof, I want to put you on the spot and ask you one last question in the 2 minutes that we've got left, or 1.5 minutes or so that we have left. By the time we come back to this program, same time next week in Nigeria and in the United Kingdom, and from all over the world where people are watching this program and will watch the program, we most likely would have had the results of the US presidential election. Which way are you calling it, Prof?
I was wrong in 2016. I went to bed with a bottle of chilled champagne in the fridge. I woke up looking for, well, I don't know what I definitely was looking for some Panadol or something that would dull the headache that I woke up with. This time, I'll still stick my head up. I will still go to bed on Tuesday night with the expectation that I'm going to be on the side of the angels this time. And the angels are not going to let me down. I haven't been so bad in the past 4 years, so I think I can see my way clearly now. And I hope the rest of the Americans can see their way clearly. But if I lose, it won't be my fault. It will be the fault of the Americans. Well,
You go with Biden.
for Biden.
For Biden, okay. It looks like some on YouTube are agreeing with you on Biden. Well, next week we'll see what that answer would be. Thank you to our viewers for joining us again this evening. It's been an exciting time for us here, and I'm sure from the questions you have put forward, it's been also been an exciting time. Now, what I'd also want to say just before we go, there were some questions that were put out there that I think Prof has already addressed. For example, the issue regarding groups that are putting arms together. Prof has addressed that in the past. It is a worrisome development, and it's not something that he would have expected to be talking about in relation to U.S. politics and democracy as a whole in the United States. But thank you for all those who put questions on. We appreciate your time to stay with us to watch this program, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Prof, any parting words before we go?
As usual, I appreciate the presence of our viewers. I appreciate what looks like an increasing desire to have an interactive session. And I look forward to seeing them next week. And I hope the news will be positive. At least something to celebrate for a change.
All right. Thank you, and bye for now.